The universe had long held a misguided belief about humanity, that we were fragile and weak, especially when it came to confronting the unknown. The vast, starless regions of space, where not even the faintest glimmer of light could break through, were thought to be the perfect hunting grounds for creatures beyond imagination. Darkness was a place of fear, a void where no creature could survive without the comforting presence of light. And humans, with their reliance on sight, their fragile vision, were considered no different. They believed we would cower, retreat, or falter when faced with the endless, suffocating blackness. But the crew of the Endeavor had different plans, and in this unknown darkness, they were about to show the universe just how wrong it was. Commander Ella Vance stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the vast expanse of space that stretched out before them. This mission would not be like any other. The Endeavor had entered the edge of an uncharted star system, one that was notorious for a myth of its own. Rumors spoke of a creature lurking within the deep shadows of this system, an alien predator with senses so honed that it could track its prey through complete darkness, rendering all other species helpless. No one knew what it looked like, how it moved, or where it hid, but all who had dared venture into the void had disappeared without a trace. The fear of this mysterious being had kept others at bay. But the humans aboard the Endeavor, especially Commander Vance, knew something others did not. The darkness was not something they feared, it was something they understood. For centuries, humans had survived in the dark. They had ventured into caves, hunted under the cover of night, and explored the deep reaches of the oceans, all in the absence of light. The darkness had never been their enemy. It was merely another challenge to conquer, another environment to adapt to, and now, standing at the edge of the unknown, Commander Vance was certain they would conquer this too. The crew of the Endeavor gathered in the briefing room, their faces illuminated by the soft, eerie glow of the screens. The silence in the room was thick with anticipation. This was no ordinary mission. This was humanity's chance to prove that they were not weak, that they were not afraid, and that they could stand tall in the face of any challenge the universe threw at them. "This is it," Vance said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We are not here to hide. We are here to find this creature, understand it, and neutralize it if necessary. The darkness is not a place of fear for us. It is our domain." The crew nodded, their resolve unshaken. They were ready. The Endeavor descended toward the planet's surface, where the vast caverns awaited. As the ship pierced through the atmosphere, the team prepared for what was to come. Every member of the crew knew their role, their purpose. The planet, known as Shadow Prime, had no natural light source, save for the occasional flare of geothermal energy. Beneath the surface, in the endless tunnels and vast subterranean caves, lived the creature that had terrorized all those who came before. The team equipped themselves with the latest technology, infrared scanners, cloaking devices, and sound-dampening boots. But it wasn't the tech that made them ready. It was their understanding of darkness itself. They knew the creature's greatest advantage was its ability to blend in with its surroundings, to move without sound or trace, to strike when least expected. But they also knew something the creature did not. Humans were creatures of adaptability. They had lived in the dark long before the stars had been born. The team disembarked from the Endeavor and descended into the planet's labyrinthine caverns. The air was thick and still, the only sound the distant echo of their footsteps. The crew moved as one, a silent, coordinated unit, their breath steady and their senses heightened. The darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides, but they were not fazed. They were at home in it. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the darkness became, until it felt as though they were walking into the very heart of the void itself. Commander Vance led the way, her infrared goggles revealing faint traces of movement in the distance. Nothing substantial, just flickers that suggested something was watching them. The creature was near. "Stay alert," Vance whispered, her voice barely audible as she motioned for the crew to halt. They paused, waiting, listening. The cavern was silent, save for the faint hum of their equipment. Then, without warning, a sharp screech echoed through the darkness, so loud that it reverberated in their bones. The predator had found them. The creature moved with an unnatural speed, a blur in the blackness, its eyes glowing like molten coals. It struck first at Lieutenant Malik, its claws raking across his arm before disappearing into the shadows. But the humans were not caught off guard. They had been waiting for this. The crew immediately activated their cloaking fields, blending into the darkness as they prepared to fight back. It was a battle of wits and patience, with both sides using the environment to their advantage. The humans set traps, using heat signatures to lure the creature into ambushes, while the creature, undeterred, relied on its superior senses to track them. Every move was calculated, every decision deliberate. For hours, the cat-and-mouse game continued. The crew's strategy was beginning to take its toll on the creature. It was beginning to make mistakes, showing signs of frustration. It had never encountered prey that could survive in the dark as humans did. But then, the ultimate test arrived. The creature, desperate, launched a final, all-out assault. It was no longer hunting, it was attacking, driven by instinct and rage. The humans, though, were ready. They activated their final trap, a network of electromagnetic pulses designed to disorient and disable. As the creature stumbled, its senses overloaded by the pulses, the crew moved in. Working as one, they struck. The battle ended not with a roar of triumph, but with the quiet fall of the creature to the ground. Humanity had conquered the darkness. And in doing so, they had shown the universe that their fear of the void was nothing more than a myth. They did not fear the dark. They ruled it. The Endeavor's sensors hummed steadily, their faint sound cutting through the heavy silence of the ship's command center. Commander Ella Vance stood still, her gaze fixed on the darkened map before her, watching the blinking lights that marked their location. They had reached the coordinates finally. Below them, on the surface of Shadow Prime, was the lair of the elusive predator that had eluded all previous attempts to capture it. For weeks, rumors of this creature had spread across the galaxy, tales of an apex predator that hunted only in the dark, an entity so skilled at its craft that it could track its prey by its heat signature, its movements, or even the faintest sound. It was said to blend perfectly with the shadows, its senses so finely tuned that the creature could ever escape it once it was chosen. But this wasn't a tale of terror for Commander Vance and her team. To them, it was a challenge. A challenge that no alien, no beast, no myth could stand in the way of. The planet's surface was a barren, featureless wasteland under an eternal night, but beneath it, the caverns spread out like a labyrinth, endless tunnels and deep, dark chambers where no light had ever touched. It was the perfect home for a creature who thrived in darkness. As the team descended, their ship shaking slightly as it passed through the atmosphere, there was no fear in the eyes of the crew, only focus. They weren't afraid of the dark. Humans had mastered it long ago. Unlike the alien species that had encountered this creature and run, the humans aboard the Endeavor were a different breed. They weren't hindered by the lack of light. They had hunted in the dark for millennia, long before space travel and advanced technology became their norm. Humans had survived on Earth's surface for thousands of years, adapting to the cycles of night and day, learning to hunt under the cover of darkness. It was in their blood, their instincts. The crew was well prepared. Their advanced technology was state-of-the-art infrared goggles that allowed them to see heat signatures, sound-dampening boots that allowed them to move in complete silence, and cloaking devices that made them all but invisible to any sensors that might try to detect their presence. This was their advantage. The predator might rule the dark, but humans ruled the hunt. As they landed, the air was thick with anticipation. The moment the ship's doors opened, they were greeted by the oppressive silence of the planet's subterranean world. The crew moved with purpose, each member taking their assigned position in perfect synchronization. The tunnels below were narrow and winding, twisting like the veins of the planet itself. The deeper they went, the more intense the silence became, broken only by the soft hum of their equipment. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, a living, breathing entity that threatened to swallow them whole. But it wasn't just the darkness they were concerned with, it was the predator. Somewhere deep within the labyrinth, the creature was watching. The team could feel it, the weight of its unseen gaze. It was close. The predator, a creature of nightmare, was unlike anything the crew had ever faced. It had evolved in these very caverns, adapting to the eternal darkness of Shadow Prime's underground world. It could see in complete darkness, detect heat, and even follow the faintest of sounds. In the wild, such creatures were unstoppable. Yet, despite all of this, humanity was not at a disadvantage. The crew of the Endeavour had studied the creature's behavior meticulously, analyzing every scrap of information they could find. They knew it could not survive if it lost its advantage in the dark. It had evolved to hunt, but it could be outwitted. Humans were quick to adapt, and that was where they would win. They had no need for light to see, no reliance on sound to track prey. Their instincts were honed, their senses sharp, and they were not alone in this dark labyrinth. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, they set up their first line of defense, a series of traps that would confuse and misdirect the predator. Heat-emitting devices were placed carefully along the path, designed to create false signals that would lure the creature into thinking it was on the right track. They weren't trying to kill it yet. They needed to learn more about it, understand how it moved, how it thought. Every step was a calculated risk. As the hours passed, the crew slowly advanced, their breath steady but quick in the cold air. They couldn't see the creature, but they could feel it a shift in the atmosphere, the faintest sound of claws scraping against the stone walls. It was close. Too close. Then, without warning, a screech broke the silence, louder and more guttural than any of them had imagined. The creature had found them. In a flash, the team sprang into action. The cloaking devices activated, rendering them invisible to the predator's enhanced senses. But even in the dark, they could hear it moving, its massive form gliding effortlessly through the caverns, its eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. The creature's roar was deafening, shaking the very walls around them as it lunged at the nearest heat source, the trap. But it wasn't enough. The team had anticipated this, and they were ready. Using the sound of the predator's attack to mask their own movements, the crew began to flank it. They were no longer just humans. They were hunters. They moved with precision, their every action coordinated as they set up a series of decoys. The predator, enraged and confused by the false signals, hesitated for the first time. It was no longer the apex predator of the darkness, it was a creature unsure of itself. The humans had taken control of the hunt. The team circled, closing in, tightening their grip on the creature's fate. With every move, they learned more, adapting their tactics to its every step. And the predator, despite its superior senses, found itself being outsmarted. The dark, which had once been its greatest strength, was now its greatest weakness. This was humanity's world now. They had shown the universe that the darkness held no power over them. It was merely another challenge to conquer. The predator, once feared by all who encountered it, was now at the mercy of those who had mastered the very shadows it had once ruled. The hunt had only just begun. The hunt had begun in silence, yet the air was thick with an invisible tension that pressed against the crew as they moved deeper into the planet's underbelly. Commander Ella Vance led the team, her mind focused, her senses sharp as she carefully navigated the narrow passageways. The walls of the caverns seemed to close in on them, the shadows hanging like a suffocating fog. Every step was deliberate, calculated as the crew moved forward with a quiet precision born from their years of training. The darkness was no longer an obstacle, it was a tool. The team, using their advanced gear and stealth, had become ghosts in the labyrinth of tunnels, blending seamlessly into the shadows. They had learned to feel the darkness rather than fear it, to understand its every shift and sound. It wasn't just a place of terror, it was their domain. But even as they moved, there was something in the air that felt different, something that set their nerves on edge. The deeper they ventured, the more it seemed as if the shadows themselves were alive, watching, waiting. The slightest sound felt amplified, the faintest movement sending ripples through the stillness. They knew the predator was near. It was only a matter of time before it made its move. Lieutenant Malik, the team's best scout, was the first to spot something. He had been carefully scanning the surroundings when he froze, his eyes narrowing in the darkness. In the distance, just out of the reach of their light, something gleamed, a faint reflection, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. But to Malik, it was unmistakable. Eyes. The creature was watching them, its gaze like burning coals that gleamed out of the dark. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Malik held his breath, his fingers tightening around his weapon. The predator had found them. And it wasn't just any creature, it was a nightmare made flesh. The beast was sleek and fluid, its body long and sinuous, moving with a speed and grace that betrayed its deadly nature. Its limbs were elongated, its claws sharp enough to rend steel, and its teeth, gleaming white fangs, could tear through anything in their path. The air seemed to hum with a primal energy as the creature's gaze flicked from Malik to the rest of the team, its instincts telling it that the humans were prey. But this wasn't its territory. The darkness was its strength, but humanity had learned to use the dark better than anyone else. The moment the creature lunged, its claws aiming for Malik, the crew sprang into action. In that split second, the team's traps were triggered. From the shadows, a net made of nearly invisible high-tensile fibers shot out, ensnaring the creature's limbs. It howled in fury, its massive frame struggling against the entangling wires. As the creature thrashed, a series of energy shields flickered to life, forming a barrier that temporarily blinded the predator. Its eyes, trained for seeing only in the dark, were now useless, overwhelmed by the sudden flash of light. The creature's roar of frustration echoed off the walls, the sound filling the cavern as it attempted to break free. But it was already too late. The creature had underestimated the humans, their cunning, their ability to adapt to the very darkness that it had once ruled. Commander Vance watched as the beast struggled, her expression calm but filled with determination. The trap was working. The creature was disoriented, its senses rendered useless by the sudden burst of light and the entangling net. It had been caught off guard, a rare occurrence for a predator so seasoned in its hunt. The team moved with efficiency, encircling the beast, never losing focus for a second. They weren't here to kill, it was never the mission. Their goal was to learn, to understand the creature, to study it, and above all, to prove to the universe that humanity was more than capable of surviving, thriving, even in the most hostile environments. The creature twisted and turned, its claws raking the air in a futile attempt to break free. It screeched again, but this time there was something different in its voice fear. The humans had turned the tables. The hunter had become the hunted. Malik stood in position, ready to move at a moment's notice, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. The beast was now temporarily neutralized, but they all knew that it would fight back. It always did. The tension was thick in the air, but Commander Vance remained calm. "Hold steady," she whispered to her team, her voice barely a murmur. They all knew the drill. They had trained for this moment for years, and it was now time to execute the final phase of their plan. The creature wasn't just a wild animal. It was an intelligent being, a creature that had adapted and evolved to be the perfect hunter. But no matter how clever it was, it didn't have what humans had, the ability to adapt on the fly, to think in ways no other species could. The predator roared again, louder this time, its frustration palpable as it began to tear at the net with renewed ferocity. But the crew was ready. They had accounted for this moment. One by one, the team activated their stun devices. Energy pulses shot out from their weapons, striking the creature with a force that temporarily paralyzed it, sending jolts of electricity coursing through its body. It screamed, the sound raw and guttural, but it could no longer move. The team had succeeded. They had captured the most dangerous creature to ever roam the darkness of Shadow Prime. The once feared predator was now subdued, its reign of terror brought to an end. The humans had not just survived, they had conquered. As the creature lay on the ground, still and motionless, Commander Vance allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had proven, without a doubt, that humanity had no reason to fear the dark. The shadows were no longer a place of terror, they were their domain. The hunt was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. The creature, wounded but far from defeated, retreated into the pitch-black depths of the cavern, its movements swift and fluid despite the injuries it had sustained. It was a master of the shadows, a predator born and bred in the eternal darkness of Shadow Prime. But as it vanished from sight, it left behind more than just the faint echo of its retreat. It left a challenge, one that the crew of the Endeavor wasn't about to back down from. Despite the predator's uncanny ability to disappear into the shadows, the humans were not deterred. They had learned something crucial in the brief encounter. This hunt was no longer just about strength or speed. It was a battle of wits, and humans were unparalleled when it came to outthinking their opponents. The darkness, once the creature's greatest ally, was now a tool in their hands. As they advanced deeper into the winding labyrinth of tunnels, the crew remained focused, their minds working as one, anticipating the predator's every move. The pursuit was relentless, each step carefully calculated, each decision a matter of life and death. The team had adapted, shifting their tactics with precision. They understood that they couldn't rely on brute force alone. They needed to outsmart the creature, confuse it, lead it into their traps without it ever realizing what was happening. They used the same darkness the predator thrived in to craft false trails, leading it in one direction before quickly turning to take another path, all the while making sure to mask their own movements with decoys and advanced cloaking technology. With every false trail they laid, the predator's confidence began to falter. It was accustomed to being the apex predator, to knowing the dark and using it to its advantage. But the humans were unpredictable, a new kind of challenge it had never faced before. They didn't just stalk their prey, they thought like their prey, anticipating movements, reading the shadows, turning them into a weapon of their own. The predator's instincts told it to strike with fearsome precision, to hunt relentlessly, to find the light and destroy it. But the humans had no fear of the dark. They reveled in it. The deeper they went into the cavern, the more it seemed that the predator's once unstoppable confidence was beginning to crack. Every move it made was met with a counter from the humans. Every attack outwitted, every attempt to outpace them turned into a trap. It was as if the creature had entered a game of chess, but it didn't know the rules. And the humans, despite their initial vulnerability, were the masters. Their technology, their ability to adapt on the fly, and their natural instincts for survival had turned the tides. The chase was no longer a one-sided affair, it had become a battle of intellect and willpower. There were moments, fleeting but intense, when the predator seemed to realize this. It would pause, its senses on high alert, as if it could feel the eyes of the humans on its every move. The beast was smart, but the humans were smarter. The creature moved like lightning, darting between shadows, but it was always a step behind. No matter how fast it was, no matter how much it relied on its terrifyingly honed senses, it couldn't catch them. The team's coordinated efforts, silent communication, flawless teamwork, and unrelenting focus had created a web the predator could not escape. The hunt had turned into a maze, and the creature, once so sure of its place at the top of the food chain, was now the one being hunted. Commander Vance was in constant motion, her mind sharp as she processed every new development. She'd seen the change in the creature's behavior, its confidence was slipping. The predator, for all its might, was beginning to realize that it wasn't the hunter anymore. It was the hunted. As the chase continued, the crew refined their strategy. They used their technology to monitor the predator's movements, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to track it. The caverns were vast and winding, a maze that stretched far beyond what their sensors could process. But every time the creature made a move, the crew countered, always staying one step ahead. The predator's frustration began to mount, the rage in its movements growing more erratic. It was a force of nature, no doubt, but now it was at a disadvantage. It had spent its entire existence in the dark, its senses finely attuned to detect even the smallest movement. But the humans, despite their reliance on technology, were using the very environment the predator thrived in to outmaneuver it. They had become shadows themselves. As the chase stretched on, the sense of impending victory grew stronger. The crew knew they had the predator exactly where they wanted it. The maze was tightening. They could feel it in the air, the moment when the predator would slip up, the moment when it would realize too late that it had been outwitted. And then, without warning, the predator broke. It was subtle at first, just a slight misstep, a brief hesitation in its movements. But the humans noticed. It was scared. Fear, the predator's one weakness, had finally taken hold. It wasn't afraid of the dark, it was afraid of the humans who had learned how to master it. The pursuit continued, relentless and unforgiving, but the team could sense that the end was near. They had hunted the hunter, outwitted the uncatchable, and soon they would prove to the galaxy that no predator, no matter how terrifying, could escape the might of humanity's will. The chase was reaching its final stages. The humans had proved that no darkness, no creature could stop them. In the end, it was not the predator's fearsome power that would win the day, it was humanity's relentless drive to adapt, outthink, and conquer. The darkness no longer belonged to the beast, it belonged to the humans. The final confrontation unfolded deep in the heart of the cavern, where the very air seemed to pulse with tension. The faintest glow from the Endeavor's equipment had long since faded into the overwhelming darkness, leaving the crew in a world where light no longer existed. It was here, in the absolute blackness, where the predator would make its last stand. Wounded, desperate, and with nowhere to retreat, it was determined to strike down the humans who had dared to challenge it. Its movements were erratic, its instincts driven by rage, but despite its terrifying agility, it had one significant flaw, the same flaw that Commander Vance had discovered in the early stages of the hunt. The creature relied on its ability to track heat signatures to find its prey, an ability that had served it well in the endless dark. But humans were resourceful, and Commander Vance, with her sharp mind and deep knowledge of biology, had found the predator's Achilles heel. The crew had prepared for this moment, and as the creature surged forward, closing in on them with deadly speed, the humans executed their final plan. At the exact moment the predator was ready to strike, the crew activated the cloaking field. The technology enveloped them in a wave of cold, absorbing all heat and rendering them invisible to the creature's advanced senses. The predator, once so sure of its victory, came to a sudden halt. Its head turned, eyes scanning the darkness, its nostrils flaring as it tried to detect any hint of warmth. But the crew, now completely devoid of any heat signature, were ghosts to the predator's senses. Confusion swept over the beast. It growled low, its razor-sharp senses twitching with agitation. For the first time in its life, it could no longer track its prey. The very thing that made it the apex predator had failed it. The creature was lost, and the humans knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. They had learned to master the dark, to turn it into a weapon. They were no longer the hunted, they were the hunters, and now was their time to strike. With flawless precision, the crew activated a series of disabling traps they had set in place over the past few hours. There was no hesitation, no room for error. As the predator circled in confusion, trying to make sense of its failure, a net shot out from the shadows, followed by a series of energy pulses that erupted from the walls. The first net ensnared the creature, its limbs tangled in the nearly invisible fibers that were strong enough to hold it down. The predator's roar echoed off the cavern walls, but it was too late. The traps had been sprung, and the beast was now at the mercy of the humans. As it struggled, the energy pulses crackled and sparked, sending waves of disabling currents through its body. The predator howled again, but its movements became sluggish, its body stiffening under the assault. The humans, using their advanced technology and their sharp minds, had trapped the creature in a net of their own making. The predator, once a nightmare to every species it encountered, was now rendered helpless by the very darkness it had thrived in. Commander Vance stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her mind clear and focused. She watched as the predator's form collapsed, its monstrous strength slowly draining away. This was the end of the hunt, the final chapter in a battle that had tested not only the crew's physical endurance, but their ingenuity, teamwork, and resolve. The predator was no longer a threat. It was a shadow on the ground, defeated by the very creatures it had once believed were weak, helpless, and bound by their reliance on the light. The crew gathered around the fallen beast, their expressions a mixture of satisfaction and solemnity. They had accomplished what no one thought possible. They had faced the unknown, a creature that struck terror into the hearts of even the bravest, and they had emerged victorious. The predator had been defeated not through sheer strength, but through humanity's greatest asset, its ability to adapt, to think, and to never give up. The darkness that had once seemed like an endless void, a place of danger and uncertainty, now felt different. It no longer represented a threat. It had been tamed, turned into a battleground where humanity had proven its place among the stars. The crew of the Endeavor had done the impossible. They had hunted in the dark and conquered it. As they returned to their ship, the weight of their victory settled over them. They had faced the ultimate challenge, the most terrifying predator in the galaxy, and had emerged triumphant. The darkness of space no longer held the same fear that it once did. For humanity, the unknown had become a realm they could master, a domain where they could thrive. The universe would remember what the humans had done here. It would remember that humanity did not fear the dark. They had learned to use it, to hunt in it, and to conquer it. As the crew of the Endeavor set course for home, they knew one thing above all else. When faced with the unknown, when surrounded by darkness, the one thing that would always remain was the unshakable will of humanity. And that was something no predator could ever defeat.